Hi everyone. In this video, I wanted to talk about some of the mistakes I've made in my woodland photography in order to help you avoid making the same ones. Now, there's nothing wrong with making mistakes. It's one of the best ways to learn, but these are kind of annoying little things or things that I noticed when I got back to Lightroom and I could have really easily fixed them in camera. And it's a bit too late once you get to the post-processing, or it's nearly impossible to fix. So I wanted to share these with you in order to help you learn as well. Now, I had an initial area in mind, which is kind of over there somewhere, and it actually looked a little bit boring. So I decided to have a little bit of a scat around and see if I could find something new. And I've actually found this absolutely amazing area. We've got this great big huge oak tree, and it's got this big broken branch, which has kind of gone all across the floor here. And then also off in the background, we've got this amazing gnarled tree with all this green moss on it. I think this scene's going to look really, really good when we've got a bit of fog and when the autumn colours come in a bit more. But I think it's a really good spot still to talk to you about the first area, which I kept messing up when I was starting out. And that's to do with the visual weight or the breathing space in my woodland images. Now, these are both related terms. And what I'm going to do is I'll hop behind the camera. I'm going to move the camera around a bit and show you exactly what I mean. And hopefully that will help you to kind of think about that a bit more when you're composing your images as well. All right, I'll join you behind the camera now. Okay, so I've come behind the camera now and I've zoomed in a little bit to explain a bit more about what I mean by visual weight and breathing space in the image. Now, if we take this oak tree here, for example, this has a very high visual weight. Now, what do I mean by visual weight? I mean how dominant it is in the frame and how much it draws your eye towards it. So a good way to think of it is it's a big, heavy object. It's a bit closer to the lens, so it has a high visual weight. So I'd say this image weighs very heavy over here, but it's a little bit unbalanced because we don't have what I'd say is enough breathing space. If you've done a bit of drawing before, you might have heard the term negative space, very similar concept. And my negative space, I say, is this kind of area here with the green, where it's a bit of breathing room. There's not too much going on and your eye can kind of rest in it. But as we've got the composition here at the moment, this is just too dominant in the frame. So what I'll do is I'll zoom out a bit and we'll try and balance the composition a little bit more. Okay, I'm just moving it around slightly. So there's a couple of things that I've done here. Because this whole area along here is quite visually heavy, we've got this big tree which I mentioned and these ones over here. There's a lot of visual weight here. So by zooming out a bit, I've created some breathing room down here, some breathing room here and here. And then also what I did was I noticed this little tree here, and it's quite small, but what it does is it just helps to kind of balance the frame a little bit. So I always like to see it a bit like a seesaw. If you've got something really visually heavy here, you need something here to balance it. So by adding this in, we kind of even out the composition a bit. I'll just zoom in again so you can see that, how it changes. So zooming out. So as you can see, the composition's a lot more balanced now, and we've got this nice breathing space all around here. Okay, so I really hope that's helped explain this idea of visual weight and breathing space and why it's particularly important in woodland photos when you've got quite a chaotic environment like this. Now, related to this is something else which I've done time and time again, and I'm still tempted to do now, and that's just shoot too wide and try and get too much in. Now, the problem with this is if you shoot too wide and you try to get too much in, it's just a chaotic mess and your eye doesn't know where to look. And I know it's very tempting when you get to a scene and everything looks really interesting that you want to get everything in. What I'll do is I'm going to step back a bit and help reveal this chaotic scene which I've created to show you my point. Okay, I should have now revealed my overcrowded, I've tried to get everything into the frame photo. Now, like I said, I've done this time and time again, and it's really tempting to do whenever you're out and you get a bit excited. So when I first got to this area, I noticed this amazing tree over here, these big branches down on the floor here. I like the texture on the trees here. I love these trees off in the background here with their gnarled branches. And it's just so tempting to get everything in. But just because it looks great when you see it in person and there's lots of interesting stuff, doesn't mean it's going to make a good photo or a photo that's kind of restful and interesting to look at for the viewer. So what you can do is instead just kind of hone in and pick one area of the trees or one of the things that drew you to the scene initially. So for me, it would be this tree here with the broken branch and these ones off here, like you saw when I started off in the video. And it's just really tempting to try and get too much in. But as I'm sure you'll agree from looking at this, it's really busy and your eye doesn't know where to look. And that's just something you need to look out for in your images. Just try and focus in on a few trees or one tree in particular, rather than trying to get the whole wide scene in. All right, I hope that's been useful. I hope it helps you kind of think about that a bit more when you are tempted to shoot wide. All right, let's move on to the next tip. Okay, so I've just moved on from where I was initially to another location where I've got a couple more tips to share with you, some mistakes that I've made time and time again to help you avoid making them. But you might be watching something, and this is a photography channel. He hasn't shown a lot of photos today, and you're completely right. But that's just because today I've just been out scouting. I've just been looking for compositions that I can come back to when I got more favourable conditions with fog. Now, I've actually been keeping an eye on the conditions, and there's going to be fog tomorrow, predicted for tomorrow morning. So I think I'll come out again tomorrow, and I might make a video of that as well. If you want to find a bit more about how I predict when there's going to be fog or some of the apps and techniques I've been using, I made a video on that, my last video, and I'll link that above for you so you can check that out if you're interested. But in this area, what I want to share with you is two other little things. They're just things to watch out for, and they're to do with your shutter speed and to watch out for your highlights. I'll just hop behind the camera and I think I'll be able to show you a bit more about what I mean and what to look out for. All right, I'll see you behind the camera. Okay, so I said I'd join you behind the camera, but I thought it's probably going to be a bit more interesting and useful if I demonstrate to you in front of the camera what I mean. Now, this area, I'm not saying by any means is a good photo, but I think it really highlights the point that I wanted to get across. Now, if you can see behind me, what we've got is this quite high contrast situation. So we have the highlights on the tree from the sunlight here, and we have the shadow regions over here. And now time and time again, when I was starting out doing my woodland images and I had this nice side light on the trees, which does look great, adds a lot of form and a lot of shape to the trees in the image, but it's really easy to blow your highlights in the images. And so what happened is I get back to Lightroom and I can see I've lost lots of detail in the highlights, or it just looks really distracting. And it's just something to watch out for, and it's really easy to miss when you're concentrating on lots of other aspects in your image. So what you can do is you can use your shutter speed or your aperture to control this when you're taking your photo. So use a higher aperture or use a higher shutter speed as well, just to try and bring those highlights down a bit. You could also try taking an exposure bracket. So that's when you have a over and underexposed image and a what you'd call ideal or middle exposure of the image. So then you can kind of do a HDR or you can do an exposure blend later on, and that way you keep your detail in your highlight regions and also maintain your shadows as well. But yeah, just something to watch out for is not to blow your highlights. I will hop behind the camera now because there's another point I wanted to show you in this area. Okay, what I'll do is I'll just zoom into this tree over here. I'll just take, so you can see. Now, what's going on here is we've got a little bit of wind going on. Talking about blowing highlights, look at all this. We've got quite a lot of wind going on, and it's blowing these leaves and it's causing them to shake a little bit. And when you're using much lower shutter speeds, like you might be in the early morning in woodland images, what can happen is you end up with blurring of the leaves. Now, you might want to use this as a kind of abstract effect or something like that, but quite often you probably are going to want them nice and sharp. And it's just something to watch out for, and you might need to bump your ISO up to compensate, and that way you can use a faster shutter speed. But yeah, it's just something, again, I've done time and time again when you've got movement like here, and I get back to Lightroom, I go to edit, and I realise my photo's all blurry in these regions. But it really is so easy to miss when you're kind of concentrating on other stuff. But yeah, if you've got kind of a windier situation, you've got some movements, don't worry about just putting your ISO up a bit and changing your shutter speed to compensate, because it's probably much better for you to have the leaves sharp than a little bit of noise from the ISO. All right, I hope that's been useful. Okay, so I really hope you found those tips useful, well, those mistakes that I made useful, and they help you to avoid making those as well, or help you just to consider them a bit when you're doing your compositions and you're out and about doing your woodland photos. So I've been out scouting in between filming this today, and I found some cool new spots and some old familiar ones, which I'm going to try and revisit tomorrow when hopefully there's some fog. I think I'll probably make a video for that as well. That one will just be a bit more about having fun and exploring and seeing what images we get. But yeah, I really hope you found this video useful. I hope those tips help you to avoid those mistakes. If you have found it useful and it has helped you out, I'd love if you could hit the like, the subscribe and the notification bell. I'll have a lot more videos coming soon. So thank you as always for watching, and I'll join you next time.